I want to start with a true story that's actually told by Kay Arthur. Many of y'all may know her. She has a national teaching ministry. And she writes this in a little booklet that I read called, "What Can I Do About My Anger?" It's a true story. She recalls, "I had just finished teaching on forgiveness at a singles conference when she came barreling down the center aisle. Dressed in a sloppy gray sweatshirt and jeans, which stretched across a little roll of fat that dropped down below her waist like a small inner tube. This woman was not one who enjoyed her femininity. Her dark hair hung from her head in greasy strands, in stark contrast to the whiteness of her face that did not have one bit of makeup on it. I had never seen or met the woman before, and yet her first words were, 'I can't forgive my father.' Blurted out through taut lips, it was obvious I was talking to a woman who was suffering greatly. Why? I didn't know, but I intended to find out. I took her gently by the arm, ushered her to the edge of the platform away from the people, and seated her so that her back would be towards the auditorium. 'Now, darling, tell me why you can't forgive your father. What has he done to you?' I asked, praying that God would give me great wisdom and that he would love this woman through me. 'My father got me pregnant and then made me have an abortion. Then he got me pregnant again, and this time I had the baby, but my baby was deformed and died. He said that I was a slut, that I had been messing around with boys, but that was a lie. After all my dad did to me, I didn't want anyone to touch me. Then he got me pregnant again, and this time I moved out. My baby was born deformed, but lived a year. When she died, I didn't want to live. I tried to kill myself. They put me in a mental hospital and said that I had to have group therapy with my family. When I told them what my father did to me, he jumped up, pointed his finger at me, and yelled that I was lying and that I was a no-good slut, just a tramp. My mother jumped up and yelled the same thing, so I shut my mouth and didn't say a word for months. I cannot forgive my father.' As suddenly as she began her story, talking almost without breathing, she stopped. She hadn't looked at me the whole time. She only stared at her feet. My immediate response to this horrible account was, 'That makes me so angry.' With that, her head shot up and said, 'What?' 'What your father did to you. It makes me angry.' Her brown eyes searched mine. Tears began rolling down her cheeks. 'No one has ever said that before,' she said as I reached up to wipe the tears off her chin. Her words were so soft, so incredibly tender. Oh, darling, not only does that make me angry, but it makes God angry, too, far more angry. God hates what your father did to you.' These were our first words together, words to each other, words that initiated her healing process, a healing that began when she discovered that God was angry at her father's sin. That weekend, she chose to forgive her father. 3 years passed, and in that time, God did miraculous things in this woman. I won't take all the time to tell you all the wonderful things that happened, but I want you to know that she now loves being a woman. You wouldn't recognize her as the same person. She has lost weight, takes good care of herself, is married, and recently became a mother. No longer is she afraid of her femininity. No longer does she hide it for fear that it might be violated. She has learned to lean upon God's word and to trust him as the father she never knew. How wonderful it was to watch God heal her. I think her healing happened so quickly because she became putty in his sovereign hands of love. It all began when my friend was willing to give her anger and bitterness to God and forgive her father. Would you be willing to do the same? Or are you too consumed by anger to let your anger and bitterness go that you might be able to forgive? Now you say, well, that's a horrible story. And I'm a counselor. I supervise 8 counselors. I started BMNU Counseling Services. I've been doing counseling for 20 years, and I've rarely heard stories this bad, although I have. I'm sad to say. Most people have not been violated to this extreme. But y'all all know that hurt is relative. You know, you may be going something where you were betrayed in a relationship, where someone deceived you, where a friend backstabbed you, where a child is rebelling, where a spouse committed adultery. You know, I don't know what it is. The name of the seminar is When Others Hurt You. All of us have been hurt. Either we've been hurt in the past, we're being hurt right now, we're going to be hurt in the future, unless you go live on an island somewhere, and then you'll probably figure out a way to hurt yourself. All of us have been hurt. So why do I start with this terrible story? Because if we can see how this woman dealt with her hurt and her anger and got to a place of forgiveness and moved on and healed, then certainly we can apply that to almost any situation. Certainly we would be able to apply that to lesser hurts. So we're going to kind of talk about her as we go. But what's the first thing that Kay Arthur said to this woman? It makes me so angry. What do you think about anger? People have all kinds of funny notions about anger. You know, in my childhood growing up, we didn't do anger. I lived in my father was an alcoholic. Nobody talked about the problem. It was like we ignored the big elephant that was right in the middle of the living room. We pretended that he wasn't there. Some people even grow up in church, and they learn somewhere along the line, or they deduce somewhere along the line that it's not okay to be angry, that anger is a sin. Well, what does God have to say about that? What does God say about anger? I want you to look on your outline at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 through 27. It's a verse that says quite a bit about anger in a short little verse. It says, "Be angry, and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity."